this?
He is weak, like his mother. Leave him.
What happened that day?
I stared death in the face, and for the first time, I saw my true self.
Has to stop. Sony just recently released the trailer for Kraven the Hunter starring Aaron Taylor Johnson, and I'm going to be honest, I think the movie looks pretty bad. Now, I'm going to be honest, the movie itself looks, I guess, fine and entertaining enough. Like, it looks like a okay, mediocre superhero movie. I guess superhero movie, supervillain movie. The tagline for the movie, which is so generic and boring, is villains are not born, they're made, but it's really just... it's another hero story. Because Sony likes to do these movies about Spider-Man villains with no Spider-Man in the picture, since, Sony owns the rights to Spider-Man specific characters, and Sony is letting Marvel share ownership of Spider-Man specifically for the MCU. They have to crank out these just bland, boring, half-baked, stupid movies about Spider-Man villains with no Spider-Man in the picture. In this separate spin-off universe, the Sony Spider-Man Cinematic Universe, or whatever it's called, and it's like that friend that's like thinks they're a part of the friend group, but they're really not, and like nobody wants to hang out with them. That's kind of like the MCU is the friend group, and Sony's that one kid who thinks they're a part of the friend group, but everyone's kind of too polite to say, no, nobody likes you, nobody likes hanging around you. So Sony thinks that they're a part of the party. They think they're invited to the party, and they're just trying to hang out with Marvel all the time. Like, yeah, we're part of the MCU, the Sony spin-off universe, but it's really not. And we thought we were going to get a connection with Venom and Spider-Man in No Way Home, but then obviously the MCU had other plans. They brushed that under the rug and shoved Venom back into his universe. Like, this trailer for Kraven looks so unbelievably stupid. And again, the movie itself looks fine and entertaining enough, I guess. I'm glad that they're actually going for an R rating and not keeping it at PG-13 rating for this villain movie, because it's about a super villain. It should be rated R, not some like PG-13, family-friendly, whatever, like Morbius or Venom were. But still, it's a story of Kraven the Hunter, and this movie betrays everything that Kraven the Hunter is in the comics. Like, Kraven the Hunter in the comics is a hunter of animals from Russia who likes to hunt animals and hang them on his wall, and thinks that animals are the greatest prize to be won by him and collected, and he mounts their heads on his wall, and he collects animals and hunts them and kills them. So when he finds out about Spider-Man, he thinks that he would be the greatest achievement to collect, since Spider-Man is kind of would be the greatest accomplishment for Kraven, since he is an apex predator in his mind. Kraven is, and he wants to hunt Spider-Man to kill him and hang him on his wall, and he thinks he would be the greatest addition to his collection of animals. Let's compare that with the version of Kraven that we see in this movie, who is too afraid to kill a lion since he likes animals too much, I guess. Then he gets mauled by this lion, and the lion's blood like drips into an open wound of Kraven's, and he gets the ability to connect with animals, which I don't know how that makes any sense whatsoever. And people say, well, we're in the same universe where a guy got bitten by a radioactive spider. I think people think it makes sense. But yeah, like, the spider was genetically enhanced. This lion is just whoopsie daisy. It started to bleed into his bloodstream, and now it's like that weird She-Hulk thing where like Bruce Banner accidentally bleeded on Jennifer Walters, and like the blood infused with her bloodstream. Like, I'm pretty sure that's not how that works. And he is just running around the streets of London in just a white dress shirt, just taking down guys and communicating with animals, and that has nothing to do with Spider-Man whatsoever. So, what has to stop Sony trying to do these stupid villain movies that are not really about villains, because they have to make them with a heart of gold, so then the audience can connect with these villains, because they're afraid that if they make the villain too ruthless and too villainous, then the audience will not connect with them. So Sony has to stop these. It's really just, I just don't think it's working. They make tons of money. I guess the Venom movies make a lot of money, but I think it's very distasteful. Morbius obviously did not make very much money. So, as always, your boy's got 3 points that I want to talk about today. First of all, we're going to do a brief history look overview of Sony's relationship with Marvel. Then we're going to talk about why Spider-Man is so necessary to this story. And third, we're going to talk about why Sony needs to be a little bit more brave with their adaptations of these Marvel characters. So, starting off with a brief history overview of Sony and Marvel's relationship. Back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I believe, around that time, in the 90s, I believe, Marvel went bankrupt. Like, they were just not doing very well at all, so they had to sell off all their characters and all their properties. That's why Universal now owns the rights to the Incredible Hulk. That's why 20th Century Fox owns the rights to the X-Men, and that's why Sony owns the rights to Spider-Man. That's also why Paramount, I believe, owned the rights to Iron Man. Marvel was bankrupt, sold the rights to a lot of their most popular characters. Sony bought the rights to Spider-Man. That's how we got Sony making Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3, the Tobey Maguire trilogy. Then, when it came time for The Amazing Spider-Man, Sam Raimi was really wanting to develop Spider-Man 4, make it the best he could possibly be, so he could make it a perfect send-off to this Spider-Man franchise that he had been building for years, and he really wanted to end on a high note. He wanted to be satisfied with the ending because he wasn't satisfied with how Spider-Man 3 turned out. Now, why did Spider-Man 3 not turn out the way he wanted it to? Well, it's because Sony interfered with the writing. Sony wanted to add Venom in. They wanted to add Gwen Stacy in. They wanted to add these things that they felt were necessary because they, for whatever reason, Sony has this weird obsession with Venom. And I guess I kind of see why, because Venom makes tons of money, as we can see. He's a great merchandising property. So always, Sony has had this weird obsession with Venom. Like, they want him in everything. They wanted Venom in the movie. They forced Sam Raimi to do all these rewrites, and he wanted to have different ideas. He had other ideas for what he wanted to do with the story of Spider-Man 3. But Sony stepped in, interfered, and said, you got to do this, this, and this, and they made all these changes. And every time a studio, it doesn't matter if it's Sony or any other studio, anytime they interfere with the creative vision of the director, it never works out well. Because movies are directed by a singular person with a vision for what they want for their story to be, and not always is that the best. Like, a lot of times directors who do have a singular vision, maybe it's a bad vision. Like, they don't have a good idea, and it just ends up being bad. That can happen sometimes too. But the pure creative force of a director and them wanting to tell a story is so much better than just a committee of people in suits and ties sitting up at the highest rank who just want to know how to make money. That's what they know how to do, and they're good at that. But they don't know how to tell great stories. So anytime they mess with the writing of any particular movie, it never works out well. That's why Spider-Man 3 was regarded as kind of a disappointing ending to the Sam Raimi trilogy. So, Sam Raimi was writing Spider-Man 4 now. He wanted to make that the best it could possibly be. But he was taking a little bit too long. You see, Spider-Man 3 came out in 2007, and it was now like 2011, the time Spider-Man 4 got a release date. And Sony was panicking because they were thinking, well, we gotta have a movie of Spider-Man out like every 5 years, otherwise we lose the rights to Spider-Man. Sony's main property, the thing that's probably keeping their company alive right now, their entertainment company, is Spider-Man. Like, name any other Sony Pictures project that does not have to do with Spider-Man or Marvel that is, like, popular. I guess Jumanji, but even then, there's one. Great. So Sony was freaking out. They were like, we got to have another Spider-Man movie out, so we don't care what it is. And before Sam Raimi had even been fired and Spider-Man 4 had even been canceled, Sony was already talking to Mark Webb and having him do The Amazing Spider-Man, which was a reboot of Sam Raimi's trilogy, just so then Sony could rush a Spider-Man movie out just so then they could keep the rights to Spider-Man. So Sony has always been a little greedy, a little bit, money hungry, and not really thinking about creativeness and telling brilliant stories. Amazing Spider-Man comes out, and it's received lukewarmish. People just are looking at it from a perspective of, well, we're just comparing it to Raimi, and we already got the Raimi trilogy, and now we've got Amazing Spider-Man. 10 years later, people just didn't think it was as good, and they had to reinvent things and change things and do things differently, and they added in the whole thing with Spider-Man's parents and all that stuff. Amazing Spider-Man not received as well, and then we come to the Amazing Spider-Man 2. At this time, Kevin Feige had talked to Amy Pascal, who is one of the higher ups at Sony at this point, one of the biggest people over there. Kevin Feige had sat down and had lunch with her, and he was saying, well, we're thinking we kind of want to introduce Spider-Man in the MCU. Is there any way that we could do that? We want to have Spider-Man in the MCU. And she threw us her sandwich in his face. That's how the story goes, and stormed out and said never. And I think she cursed him out even, and dropped an F-bomb on him or something. So Sony was wanting to keep Spider-Man no matter what, and they had all these ideas to set up a Spider-Man cinematic universe, which Spider-Man has an extensive rogues gallery, tons of villains, tons of characters in the Spider-Man universe, so it would make sense, but when they were wanting to build it around this Andrew Garfield Amazing Spider-Man series. So, Amazing Spider-Man 2 was not as much a Spider-Man sequel to the Amazing Spider-Man, but more of setting up all of these things that they plan to do, like a Sinister Six movie. They're planning to do an Aunt May movie at one point, like literally. That's real. And they were doing all these other things. They wanted to set up the Spider-Man cinematic universe. So instead of focusing on let's tell a story about Spider-Man and make it good, they were saying, hey, Mark Webb, you gotta set up all these other movies that we plan to make in this Spider-Man cinematic universe and not focus on telling your story. So that's why The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is, I think, the lowest grossing Spider-Man movie to date. And I believe it is it was obviously panned by critics and audiences who did not love this movie because they said it was a jumbled mess of just setups for Sony's cinematic universe. Now, I love The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I think it's a great movie, and I look past all of those aspects because obviously none of them happened. But I still can look at the movie and watch it and be like, wow, this is a great, entertaining movie. I think Andrew Garfield is probably the best Spider-Man out of the three: Tom Holland, Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield. He really is a great actor, and he plays the character so well. And just the visual effects in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 look amazing. They're some better than most Marvel movies we get nowadays. And as that movie, I do love it, but there's obviously some setup from Sony there, and they kind of meddled with what the original plan was. The original plan for this movie sounds a lot better than what we got, by the way. You can do some research into what the original plans for The Amazing Spider-Man 2 were. So then, after Sony's universe fell apart, their own thing that they tried to do, which, by the way, Sony doing their own universe has not worked before, and now with the whole Kraven, Venom, Morbius, soon to be Madam Web, and I think they're doing other movies as well, El Muerto or whatever. It hasn't worked before, so I'm guessing it's not going to work again, but we'll have to see how it goes, I guess. So their universe fell apart, and then they came crawling back on their hands and knees to the MCU, and that's how we got the partnership with the MCU and Sony Pictures, and how Spider-Man was able to be introduced in Captain America Civil War. So now Spider-Man's been in the MCU, that's been established, but then Sony decided, for whatever reason, we're going to make a Venom movie. Venom makes a lot of money. But the MCU doesn't really have any plans to introduce Venom, so what are we going to do? We're going to tell our own Venom story. We're going to make our own universe with Venom. Just even talking about this stuff just makes my blood boil. I hate this stuff. So they made Venom without Spider-Man, even though in order for Venom to exist, the symbiote has to go to Peter Parker. Peter Parker finds the symbiote, this alien life form, that when it goes on his body, it turns his suit black and it gives him these super amazing powers. And it heightens his abilities, but it also takes control of him and it manipulates his emotions. It's trying to live off of him and feed off of Spider-Man and use him for its own benefit, because as the extra lore that's established in the comics, it comes from another planet. There's all this other stuff involved with it. There's a whole planet of symbiotes, and there's tons of other stuff, involved with it, but basically, that's the gist of it, and you probably already know that. And then, after Spider-Man realizes that it's manipulating him and using him for its own benefit, and changing his emotions and making him more angry and more just a worser person, then he rips it off and gets rid of it, and then it goes and finds Eddie Brock, and it bonds with Eddie Brock, and he becomes the best host for the symbiote because he's filled with so much anger and resentment for Peter Parker and for Spider-Man, and then he realizes that they're the same person. This is a particular story from... This is basically the gist of it, but there's a lot of adaptations, obviously, and the story can change from time to time, but basically, then Eddie Brock has a feud against Spider-Man, now he gets the symbiote, and he becomes Venom, and he's much bigger and taller and stronger than Spider-Man because he has so much more hatred and anger that he's not letting go of. And then, that's where all the Venom stuff ensues, but for the movie, they decided, we're not going to have Spider-Man, we're just going to skip that part of the story. So then they tried to make Venom a hero-ish story. Like, Venom's just kind of an anti-hero. Like, he's a bad guy, but he'll save someone every once in a while. Like, he still does good things. Which I guess in the comics, Venom is kind of an anti-hero, but not nearly as nice of a person as Eddie Brock is in the Venom movies. Like, he's just a nice guy, and he's, happens to do bad things sometimes. Like, no, Sony. Venom is a villain. Since you are obsessed with Venom so much, you would think you would know what Venom is supposed to be. He's supposed to be a villain. He's supposed to be a bad guy. He's not just some guy who has a heart of gold and is like, well, I'm trying to get a girlfriend and I want to save people. And no, he is a villain. He's a bad dude. So that's how we got Venom and Venom Let There Be Carnage, which I don't even want to get started talking about Venom Let There Be Carnage because I hate that movie. It's just, the Venom movies are not good in any way. And obviously, we got Morbius. What else do we have to say about that? Somebody decided we're going to take Morbius, who is one of the lesser-known Spider-Man villains, not include Spider-Man in the story yet again, and just make him some anti-hero who is bad, kind of, but he'll also kind of save a few lives sometimes if he's in the mood. He's just not really a bad guy. Just the system is against him. I hate hate this Sony universe. I really do. So we got all the stuff with Venom and No Way Home and Morbius and blah, 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 blah. So there you go. There's a brief overview of Sony's history with Marvel and their history of building their own cinematic universe and what they're trying to do with the Sony's universe of Marvel characters. I forget the abbreviation for it, but it's dumb. Now I'm going to move on to my second point, which is the need for Spider-Man. Like, Spider-Man is a necessity in these stories. Without him, the stories are not good. Because all of these characters, Venom, Kraven, Morbius, even El Muerto, who's coming later, they stem from Spider-Man. Their very existence is caused by Spider-Man. Kraven the Hunter, the reason he comes to New York City is because he's going after Spider-Man, who he thinks is going to be his best catch yet. Venom does not exist without Spider-Man getting the symbiote. That's why if you notice in the movies, the Venom movies, Venom doesn't have the spider on his chest. I mean, you guys probably all don't know this. I'm assuming you guys are nerds as well. That's why Venom has the spider on his chest, because the symbiote found Spider-Man and then just copied that idea and carried it over to Venom. And then in the movies, he doesn't have the spider. Spider-Man needs to be in the picture for the story to be good. These stories don't work without Spider-Man. And also, they don't work without Spider-Man because Spider-Man is our main protagonist. We get behind Spider-Man. He is a good guy. He's a superhero. So, having Spider-Man as our main character in the story, we can then have villains for him to go up against: Kraven the Hunter, Venom, Morbius, who do not have to be people who are hearts of gold for us to get behind them, because we don't have to get behind them because they're villains. They're the antagonists of the story. They're the obstacle that Spider-Man, Peter Parker, has to overcome. So therefore, not making Spider-Man the center of the story and introducing them just as villains in the MCU, since Sony can't wait for whatever reason, instead of doing that and having that be a good plot line, what they do is just make the villains our main characters. So therefore, Sony doesn't have the guts to make them really bad or truly evil. They're like, well, we're afraid that if we make them villains with evil hearts and just like these pure villains for villains' sake and just evil, then the audience is not going to connect with them. Even though a classic example of this is Joker with Joaquin Phoenix, who, to be fair, the movie's kind of the premise is the system is against him, and he starts out as a good guy with good intentions, and then he just never succeeds in this horrible society, so then he just turns into a villain. But by the end of that movie, he's pretty much irredeemable. Like, we're not rooting for him. It's a tragedy story. It's a downhill slope of just a descent into a completely deformed human who is just completely lost, and there's no hope for him. That's what these movies should have been. And the Joker made tons of money. It was nominated for Best Picture. It got all this acclaim and praise, and people loved it. And it really worked because it was a tragedy. It was a sad story. It was a guy who turns into a villain. It was the origin story of an evil person, a truly evil villain, because the Joker is a villain to Batman. But Sony does not have the guts to do something like that. They're like, well, we gotta make them good guys. So like Venom, who is a villain, he kills people. In the movie, he kind of kills people, but like he has a girlfriend. It's since the villain is our main character, they have to have a villain to fight, an antagonist, and then they're kind of the hero of the story. They're saving the city from this evil villain who's just a little bit worse than they are. There needs to be Spider-Man, because without Spider-Man, we don't have that emotional connection to the villain, because Spider-Man has an emotional connection to every single one of these villains that he fights. Maybe not like Kraven the Hunter as much, but in certain adaptations of the stories, definitely Eddie Brock, who sometimes they're like longtime friends, or they just have this emotional connection, and the way it plays out with Peter Parker and the symbiote, and then how it gets transferred to Eddie Brock, that's an emotional connection there, and there's an emotional core to that story that's really, we can get behind that. Same thing with Morbius. Michael Morbius, there's certain aspects of the story, certain tellings of the story where Peter Parker is kind of friends with Morbius, Dr. Michael Morbius, or something. He's involved in the story, so then he has a personal vendetta against Spider-Man. So, without Spider-Man, the villains that they introduce are just the opposite of them. In Venom, the first one, the villain is the Silver symbiote, who I forget the name of because I don't care. In Let There Be Carnage, it's just Carnage, who is a better villain, I feel like, but also he's just the opposite of Venom, and there's no emotional connection there. It's not interesting at all. It's just, well, we're opposites and we have to fight because the story demands it, so let's fight. And then Kraven, the enemy is going to be just, I guess, humans, because he hates humans because they kill animals, even though Kraven's supposed to kill animals in the first place. Spider-Man is necessary. He is needed. Without Spider-Man, the story is not interesting and it fails. And you can see that because people don't highly praise these Sony Spider-Man spin-off movies because they don't have Spider-Man. They don't have our emotional character who we can get behind, who's a superhero, who's actually our protagonist. And moving on to a third and final point, that is bringing us to Kraven the Hunter. So how does all of these 2 points, all this stuff that I've said here, how does this all tie into Kraven the Hunter? Well, Kraven the Hunter is going to be the story of Kraven, Sergei Kravenov is his full name, who in the comics hunts animals. He respects animals, but he respects them in kind of a twisted, messed up way to where he respects them as just prizes to be won and things to be killed and things to be hung up on his wall so we can look at them and marvel at how great of a hunter he is. And when he finds out about Spider-Man, who lives in New York City, Kraven being from Russia, he finds out that Spider-Man's in New York City, and he tracks him down, and he tries to hunt him, and he keeps trying, and Spider-Man is just too good for Kraven, and then Kraven gets really upset about that, and he keeps trying to beat Spider-Man, and he becomes one of Spider-Man's best villains. In the movie, Aaron Taylor Johnson, which, by the way, Aaron Taylor Johnson, I'm not dogging his performance at all. I think he's going to do a good enough job for the performance and the script that he was given. I think he looks like Kraven. He definitely, like, if he was given better material for writing, he could be an awesome Kraven. Even in the poster, they have him doing the iconic Kraven comic panel pose, which looks awesome. And I just, like, if I just saw the poster, I would feel a lot better about the movie than I did seeing the trailer, which is so disrespectful to the Kraven character. Now he's grown up from his father, who's we have to be predators. We are ruthless. Oh, these mean people. And then when Kraven is faced with the opportunity to kill a lion, he can't shoot the lion because he likes animals too much, because he's an animal lover, which is not what he is in the comics. And then he gets mauled by this lion because he saved it, which kind of goes against what he just did. But then a drop of lion blood gets into his bloodstream, and he becomes infused with the powers of being able to see things through the perspective of animals and do animal things and connect with animals. They have the ability to talk to animals, which again makes absolutely no sense, but whatever. Now he's going to fight against the human hunters who are going after these animals that he loves so much and he wishes he was a part of. It's honestly one of the most stupid out there ideas and things that I've seen in a long time. And I'm 16 years old, but 16 years is a lot of time to see stupid things. Not cool, Sony. I don't know what you're doing. Actually, I do know what you're doing. I know exactly what you're doing. We're in between Spider-Man 3 and 4 right now. And since we have a lot of time before Spider-Man 4 comes out, Sony's thinking, how do we keep the Spider-Man rights? We're going to crank out all these spin-off movies. They just don't work. El Muerto, who has appeared in like one comic, they're going to make a whole movie about him. Apparently that movie's kind of in jeopardy right now. I don't know if it's 100% still happening, but still, they talked about it, at least. Making a Madam Web movie, which Madam Web does tie into Spider-Man, but it's going to be like a younger version, like exploring her story. That could be actually pretty good. That could be surprisingly great, but I don't know. And this movie's just a teaser trailer. You know, you can't really dog it too much. And again, it's an R-rated movie. At least Sony's getting better at realizing, well, when we do these villain stories, they should probably be rated R, so then the villains can kill people and actually do these gnarly things. I am glad that they made it rated R at least, and for a rated R movie about a character named Kraven, played by Aaron Taylor Johnson, who is not at all connected to the version of Kraven from the comics, it looks fine. I mean, it looks good, I guess. But if you say that it's the same version of Kraven that is from the comics, Sergei Kravenov, if you say these two are the same people, then immediately the premise falls apart. Like, it's just, no. Like, the Venom movies, are they fun and entertaining enough for what they are? Being movies about some guy named Eddie Brock who comes in contact with a life form called the symbiote that is not at all connected or supposed to be an adaptation of that character from the Marvel comics. If you just look at it as that, like take the movie by itself and disconnect it from the Marvel universe, then sure, it works fine. I mean, it's just funny and entertaining and whatever. But to say, as soon as you say it's connected to the version from the Marvel comics, then that's where I say this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. Or at least one of. I've seen some stupid things. So I just really am upset about this whole Kraven thing and Sony's spin-off universe. I wish, I pray, I hope every night that they would stop with this, because it's just driving me nuts. Even just talking about it now, it makes my skin crawl. It makes my teeth grind. I can't stand this Sony universe. And I just kind of wanted to vent out some of that anger and just talk about what are the problems that need to be fixed and what exactly is the bottom of this issue and what exactly is going on here. So I did hope you enjoyed listening to me talk about this. And let me know if you agree down below in the comments. If you don't agree, then I would love to talk to you. And let's have that rational, intellectual discussion, as always, to get to the bottom of how we agree and disagree and how we have separate beliefs, our backgrounds that we come from. Be sure to let me know all your thoughts on this issue down below in the comments. Have you seen the trailer for Kraven the Hunter yet? If so, be sure to let me know what you thought down below in the comments. So, in conclusion, I'm not excited for Kraven the Hunter. It might be a good movie, who knows, but don't you dare say that it's connected to the Kraven the Hunter character from the comics in any way, shape, or form, because I will get very upset. I mean, that felt pretty good. It was kind of therapeutic to get all that out. So if you like this video, I would highly appreciate it if you left a like on this video. And if you want to see more videos by me as soon as they come out, be sure to subscribe and turn on all notifications for my channel, because I'll be coming out with videos in the near future. Marvel, Star Wars, Disney, Pixar, all of these things. It's going to be fun. It's fun times. I love talking about movies so much, and I know you do too, which is why you watch this video. Be sure to click right here on my face to watch another video by me, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye-bye.